Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is March 18th, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? This is going to be a very brief video about the so-called Russian elections. I guess nobody was surprised when we heard yesterday that Putin won. Clearly, we knew that this was rigged. These were rigged elections from day one. And what is interesting is here this time, Putin gave himself a very high score of 87.5% of the vote. Previously, in the previous elections, he would give himself about 70, high 60s, but now he decided to go to the high, 80s. And it's an indication that Putin really wants to showcase to the Russian people that, he is unanimously, most of the Russians approve of him. And this was not a surprise for us, and the rest of the world, of course, and thankfully condemned these elections as being a farce and a circus. There were even actual videos that were showcasing people at night stuffing the ballot boxes with, fake votes, just so Putin could have higher scores, probably. But the number was purely invented, right? It's not like they even counted them, in my opinion. I think it was just purely invented numbers. So, although Putin, of course, won the elections, this was just a period of re-legitimization for Putin, right? He needed to remind the Russians who's in charge, who the real Tsar is. So for him, this was just a formality that he needed to go through to remind the Russians that he's still the strong, powerful leader of Russia. And the Russians like it, right? But even if Putin won the elections, the so-called democratic and free elections, he is still by far the largest, biggest loser in Russia's history, without a doubt. And here's a list of what I quickly compiled of some of his biggest losses and failures in the last 25 months since the start of the so-called special military operation. Yeah, 400,000 soldiers killed, over 400,000 Russian men that died in Ukraine. The Black Sea Fleet is missing in action. 20% or over 20% of the Black Sea Fleet has been destroyed or damaged, and most of the vessels now are hiding in remote ports in the Black Sea. You have over a dozen oil refineries and oil depots that have been damaged or destroyed by Ukrainian drones since the beginning of this year, and this will continue on, which certainly will damage Russia's economy in the next few months. We'll see the impact in the next few months. You have thousands of armored vehicles, whether it be tanks, self-propelled artillery systems, MBTs, APCs, IFVs that have been destroyed by Ukraine. Sweden and Finland have been admitted to NATO, and Europe has finally awakened to the Russian threat. In the last few months, you've seen countries like France, Germany, Britain, the Baltics, and Poland, understanding now that they need to really, really prepare themselves in the eventuality of a Russian attack and really speaking more about it, which is very positive. Sweden and Finland, of course, are also playing a huge part in this. You have Russia losing its regional influence, essentially its soft power in countries like Armenia and Kazakhstan. Armenia now is pivoting away completely from Russia, following, what happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Armenia now understands that Russia is not a good partner to rely upon. You have Kazakhstan as well, that is trying to seek closer ties to Europe and the United States. So they're pivoting away, and many other countries will do so as well. The arms export business, the Russian arms export business, which was very lucrative before the invasion of Ukraine, has completely collapsed. No country is interested in purchasing Russian weapons, apart from the very, very poor and destitute countries in Africa. And then you have absolutely no innovation capabilities on the Russian side. Yes, Russia can produce perhaps a few drones, some things here and there. They have some tricks in their bag, but they have shown multiple times that they cannot innovate in the grand scheme of things. For example, the new generation main battle tank, the T-14 Armata, scrapped. The Su-57 missing in action, even if Russia built a few of them. We haven't seen them in action in a very long time. Russia is unable to repair or build new A-50s. And essentially, there's just very little innovation. And the very little innovation that exists in Russia is entirely dependent on the West. As Russia needs these components, the technology to power their high-tech weaponry and other high-tech spaces. So overall, these are some of the things that I listed out as being massive failures by Putin. So he's one of the largest, biggest losers in Russia's history. So let me know in the comments what do you guys think, if there's anything else that I should have added to this list. But of course, because of all these things that Putin is very well aware of, and also the fact that Putin has lost control over his own borders 3 times in the past year. That is huge, right? We now have this border incursion in Belgorod and Kursk, which Putin to this day cannot control. That's been ongoing now for 5 or 6 days. And Belgorod is being shelled now on a daily basis by these Free Russian legions. So overall, there's a lot of things that are going wrong for Putin. And far more things are going wrong than going right for him. And as a result of that, now you have Putin that is now essentially, after his victory speech, saying that, he's essentially doing nuclear saber rattling, saying that if there was a conflict between Russia and NATO, that this would be one step away from World War III, essentially hinting at the usage of nuclear weapons, and that everything is possible in today's world. So this is what happens when you have a leader that is feeling weak, that is feeling threatened. He will start talking about, the big guns that he has. But that's the only thing that keeps Russia in the game right now. It's its nuclear weapons, which of course we cannot underestimate, but you can sense that there is a weakness within Putin. And the Kremlin, are like the elites within the Kremlin, like sharks, and they're smelling blood in the water. And the only way that you can depose of Putin at this point is the elites. That's the only thing that will could potentially happen, where we would see a scenario of Putin getting killed. Forget about the Russians, and I will bring this to your attention in my next video that I want to share with you. Forget about the Russian society protesting and somewhat deposing Putin. That is never going to happen. It's a lost cause. The Russian society has been a lost cause for a very long time. But again, the elections could have maybe shown that what was an opportunity for the Russians to show that they were against Putin, right? Where were these Russian liberals and the so-called Russian liberals and those that were opposing Putin? Where were they? Why weren't they protesting, millions of them, in the streets of Moscow, St. Petersburg, the largest cities in Russia? And what we've seen is essentially a doubling down by Russian society in supporting the genocide and the terrorism that they're currently doing in Ukraine. And they have a sheeple mentality, and I will show you why. These are Russians that have double citizenship, so they're Russians and Estonians that voted during their so-called Russian elections in Estonia. And so this is a gentleman that is interviewing them, asking them who they voted for. And of course, there was only one choice in the ballot box. But anyways, let's see what they have to say. So this lady says that she voted for Putin. For Putin? Yes. Why Putin? Why are you so surprised? I don't know. He's been in power for 25 years longer than Brezhnev. Not tired of him? No. A man is judged by what he does. Were you actually in Russia 25 years ago and now in present days? Or clearly you weren't, because you're an Estonian citizen. And it doesn't seem like you were really bothered to go to Russia to vote there. And to me, this is another thing I was kind of surprised. Why did the Baltics or other countries in Europe allow Russians to vote in their countries? If the Russians were so, wanted to vote so badly, why didn't they go just to Russia, right? I don't think this was the right call to allow Russians or people with double citizenship to vote in Europe. Go back to Russia if you feel like this is so bad in Europe. If Putin decides that Estonia needs protection, will that be right? Will you support it? In Estonia, our authorities will bomb us and kill us. This man has been in power for 25 years. Doesn't this bother you? And Belarus, they also sit and live wonderfully. It doesn't bother me. We vote for democracy. You can't understand where democracy is. And where is the external government? There's no democracy here in Estonia. Tell me, please. Vladimir Putin started the war in Ukraine, in 2022. Well, since 2014, who started the war? Again, this is a typical narrative that pro-Russian people will bring up when you talk about the invasion of Ukraine 2022. They'll always start with the line, who bombed Donbass in 2014? The typical Kremlin lie that was brought up to the Russians back in 2014. Doesn't it bother you that Vladimir Putin has been in power for 25 years? No, it doesn't. If a man can do the job, let him work for 100 years. Take any job you want. How did the vote go? Great. If it's not a secret, who did they vote for? For Putin? Why? Because he's the best. After Zhirinovsky died, he's the best. And Putin did not start it. It was Zelensky who started it. He bombed Donetsk and Luhansk from 2014 to 2022. Why did I tell you guys? Exactly. This is, especially notice the demographic, the age here. These are all old Russians that lived in the Soviet Union, that were brought up with this propaganda. They're sheeple. They have a sheeple mentality. There's absolutely no way you can convince them otherwise that they're being lied to by the Kremlin, by Putin. That this isn't a war killing your own people. He didn't attack Ukraine in the first place. Ukraine has invaded Donbass. Where did you get this information from that he didn't attack? From where? I read everything. I watch all the shows on the internet. Of course, it's Russia 24, Russia 24, whatever other, state-owned media channel in Russia that they're watching. Because anything else is, Western propaganda lies. So this is just an indication to you guys that unfortunately there's many Russians that are currently living in Europe and other countries around the world, in the free world, that still believe in the Kremlin lies. And this is such a paradox, You are living so well in Europe or so well in the United States or Canada, these Russians. And yet, you're complaining that democracy, there's no democracy here, life is terrible, Putin is strong, why don't you go back, right? Why don't you go back to Russia if you love it so much there? They won't be able to answer that with a good, legitimate answer, unfortunately. So the only solution here, the only true solution to this war is a total destruction of Russia, its military, its regime, and the Russians, people like them, repenting for the crimes that they have allowed to happen in Ukraine. And this will have to happen for generations. Otherwise, we're going to continue facing generations of brainwashed people like them. And the newest generation will be formed the same way. We'll be told that the Ukrainians are Nazis, the free world is their enemy, and they need to continue fighting it. That NATO will somehow attack Russia. We have to take action, and we have to stop playing diplomacy. Diplomacy is important, but hard action is necessary. So that's why I need to provide as many resources and help to Ukraine right now, because Ukraine can get the job done. A huge thank you for your support, guys. Again, please like my video, subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!